over the last few years of working in crypto, I've accrued more NFTs and altcoins and random crypto assets than I can count across more chains than I can remember. And it's always been a struggle to find a single crypto wallet where I can track everything I own. That is until I discovered Zerion. Zerion Wallet is for everything you own on chain. Yes, that includes all of your assets across more than 14 different networks. Zerion is giving people the chance to be true owners by making it simple to explore, collect, mint, test, and contribute to the new internet. Go to zerion.io/download today to take ownership over your on-chain assets, available on iOS, Android, and desktop. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Rehash, a Web3 podcast. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and today we're speaking with Richie Bonilla, founder of Forage, about on-chain distribution and culture, how to introduce new consumer behaviors, and thinking beyond skeuomorphic models. Richie is a repeat guest who previously made an appearance on Rehash almost a year ago in Season 4, Episode 7, where he talks about the future of independent work. Today, Richie is working on Forage, the easiest way for people to discover and support their favorite on-chain projects. You'll hear us mention his new project as Quests in this episode, but since we recorded this episode, the product has actually been renamed to Forage, and you can find it at forage.xyz. In this highly conversational episode, Richie and I talk through traditional models of distribution in media that have failed us and left a bad taste in our mouths, and propose new models of on-chain distribution that breaks down a lot of the assumptions we've made about concepts like advertising and ownership. I'd like to take a quick minute to remind everyone that we've recently moved our community over from Discord to Telegram. So if you haven't done so already, please join us at t.me/rehashweb3. You'll be the first to hear about all things Rehash by joining our group chat, such as when we're recording with our guests, so you can tune in live. And finally, all of our episodes are available for mint on pods.media/rehash. And you can view all of our recordings live at pleaser.house. Richie was nominated by Ninty Nick and voted onto the podcast by Ninty Nick, Brennan Mulligan, Spencer Graham, Fifth World Zach, and Triumph. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Richie. Hey, Richie, welcome back on the podcast. I think you're one of our few returning guests that we've had on Rehash so far. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Thanks for taking the time once again. I'm super excited to chat with you today. Appreciate you taking the time. So today, what I want to talk to you about is something that is really interesting to me and something that I've been thinking about, and I think a lot of people will be interested in this. And it really is talking about how this new meme that we've seen out there, on-chain media, on-chain community, on-chain culture, all of these things, we're really going to dive into those and break down why this on-chain media, on-chain culture thing has been getting so much buzz and so much hype, what it actually means and how it can actually impact real people in the future. So to set the stage for us, I think I want to start with some issues from your perspective that you've seen with traditional media, and specifically from the perspective of media distribution. So we're not talking about building a media brand or anything like that, but rather with distribution. So how do you acquire viewers? How do you acquire listeners? If you're a product, how do you acquire customers? This is something that I know you've thought a lot about. And so just to set the stage for people, let's start with what are some of the problems that we are seeing with traditional ways of distribution?
Yeah, I mean, I come at this from the perspective of being someone who's launched many products in my career as like a founder and also as a consultant helping founders between companies. And I think that one of the things that became really clear to me, especially as I started over the last 5 years doing things in Web3, is that like a lot of the playbooks that we take for granted in Web 2 don't really apply when you're trying to get distribution or get the word out or find your 1,000 true fans in a Web 3 context, right? We take for granted in Web 2 things like Hacker News or Product Hunt. There's other playbooks like ad spend, right? Stuff like that, that are part of these very well-worn playbooks. Like you go through YC, they teach you these things, but those aren't really available to Web 3. And I feel like a lot of it is, it's not as much a technical problem as it is like a cultural issue, and have like things like Product Hunt and Hacker News, which are like fully captured by their own audience and are not really open to Web3, right? So you'll have things on Product Hunt that rank well as a Web3 product, but like people in Web3 don't really recognize them. And it's because the system on Product Hunt is very gamed. And there's just that one front end for Product Hunt. So that's it. You have to, you play that game. If you learn how to play that game, like it loses its actual predictive power of something you'd be interested in. And then on Hacker News, like culturally, like they're very opposed to anything crypto. So it's just walking into a hornet's nest to go in there. And so that's where I started to really start thinking about, well, how do you do this if those playbooks that we take for granted are not available to us? Like, what are the new things? And also, like more broadly, how do you avoid that just happening again? So like in the future, right? Why do we have to rebuild these same platforms over and over again and watch them get captured by their community or become self-referential or become gamed? And then there's just need for another one, right? So what's the end game for the web to like get out of that cycle?
Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's much more of a problem with the existing structure, the existing way of doing things, the existing playbook, more so than the fact that Web3 just isn't really invited to the party right now on Product Hunt or on Hacker News or on traditional sites like that. Like creating a new Hacker News or creating a new Product Hunt for Web3 isn't going to solve our problems if we continue to follow the same playbook that we followed traditionally.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when people try to build a new Instagram, but it's got posts and it's got likes and it's got all the same ingredients, but they're like, but we're not going to make compromises because we have values. That's not enough, actually. You need to have something different or else you just sort of get sucked in. And it's common for like idyllic founders to get caught in this trap of, but we're just going to do it different. I think I've been around long enough to see these things happen and be like, okay, no, but you actually need a structural difference in order for things to be different in the long term, right? When your platform actually matters and people care about it, that's when those influences start to affect you. So yeah, that's where my mind's going. How do you actually get out of that cycle? How do you get out of that loop? What's the structural difference?
Yeah, and get out of that skeuomorphic thinking too, right? Of like, let's build the Web3 Instagram, the Web3 this, the Web3 that. How do we actually rethink the structure entirely from the ground up? So when you're thinking about this question, what are some thoughts that have come to mind for you or some ideas that have come to mind for you?
One of the things that stands out to me when I bounce back and forth between like Web 2 and Web 3 contexts is that the culture is different. There is a different value set and there are different behaviors that we have. And I think that if we think of Web 3 as a movement, if we want to have broader impact as a broader industry and change some of these existing systems, whether they be finance or social media or some of these other things that are like really influential in society, I think that what's currently the internet subculture of Web3 or on-chain culture is incubating those behaviors and those values and the membership, the people that are actually going to be a part of that change. And so I started to think about what are those behaviors? What do we need to rally around? And I don't think that's a settled question, right? We have had tokens, we can send them, we can buy them, we can sell them, we can swap them, we can stake them. Those are behaviors. But then we also have like tokens we can mint. And it's like minting tokens is another behavior. And I feel like when I look at things like Zora and they replace the like button with mint, that gets me thinking, okay, wait, maybe minting is like a consumer behavior that we're incubating here that actually makes all the difference, right? Like perhaps there's a actual structural difference there. And that if we as a culture can champion these new behaviors, we actually have a chance at doing something that will be different longer term.
So minting instead of liking, this is a narrative that we've been pushing in Web3 for a while. And it's definitely the end goal. It's the North Star. We can replace every like with a mint where the creator of that post or that work actually earns something from it. Like wonderful. But when we're talking about introducing new customer behaviors and then getting those behaviors to proliferate, that is, at least to me, sounds like an extremely daunting task. So when we think about trying to introduce and get people to widely adopt a new consumer behavior, how do we even begin to do that?
Huge question, right? I think there's a narrative around Web3 that like, oh, it's all about reducing friction. It's all about improving UX, right? Once we improve the UX, then it'll be fine. But I think that we're approaching a place where the UX is actually good enough. Like it's not that hard to set up a wallet anymore. It's not that hard to sign a transaction, right? If you just sent people to an iOS app like Rainbow and you were like, create a wallet, and then you can use that to scan a QR code, like these are not behaviors that are like so far out of a person's zone. I think that when we think about getting people to do something new, it's like an equation of reducing friction, yes, but also increasing desire. And there's tons of examples of things where people deal with tons of friction because the desire is very high, right? And so like things like we experience, everyone's familiar with standing outside of a party or a club or something that's a really annoying experience, but people will do it if it's like a really great place to party, or if there's a really good concert, or if there's a brand new phone or device that they are willing to stand outside and wait in line to get that thing. These are high friction experiences, but desire is very high. And when I think of like the most extreme version that I'm familiar with, I think of Burning Man. Burning Man is like the most high friction experience that you can voluntarily go into. It's like incredibly hard to do every single part of that. And it's expensive and it's ridiculous. And yet desire is so high that people opt into doing that year after year. Is minting something on Zora easier or harder than going to Burning Man or standing outside in line for a club or something? And it's like way easier, right? Like setting up a wallet is so much easier than doing any of these things. And so it's, if desire was high enough, people would be fine with doing it, right? And people will be fine with doing it. And so I think that we can see a path where UX is improved enough that pretty much anyone can do that. And the real question is, what are we doing here that's fun enough that people are going to want to deal with even just a little bit more friction, or just learning something new in order to do it? When I think of the term on-chain culture, I think about what are we doing that is so fun that people want to come do it too? Like, what are the new experiences that are possible? And I do feel like there's like a flippening that's happening here where like infrastructure's there and like application layer stuff is getting good enough that we can start having net new experiences on the web that increase that desire to get involved. That's what I'm interested in, like starting to push forth and highlighting is like the things that are actually happening here that we can show to people and be like, this is fun, cool, this is new. You can't do this anywhere else. Check it out. This is why it's worth downloading like Rainbow app to create a wallet and scan a QR code.
What would you say are the main reasons why people currently or historically have taken part in these really high friction activities, like standing in a really long line to buy a new product or going to Burning Man or doing all of these things? Would you say that a lot of it has to do with status and playing status games? I mean, if you are a sneakerhead and there's a new sneaker that's dropping and you're one of the first 100 people to get it, that's maybe a status symbol. If you go to Burning Man, maybe that is a signal to show people something about you, that you're a burner, whatever that may mean to different people. But yeah, would you say that status is a big part of it? Or what other factors would you say contribute to people having the desire to do these really high friction activities?
Yeah, I mean, we're humans and our serotonin system is older than trees. And that's very much built on the fact that like we care about our status. So like to say that it's not status driven would be like, I think it's impossible to make that claim, but I don't think it's the only thing. And I think that people are definitely driven by status. I think that people are also just driven by community and identity and belonging, of feeling like there's people out there that understand them. I definitely feel that when I interact with people in Web3, there's like a sense of shared values that I get. And there's like a camaraderie that's really easy to build. And there's some safe assumptions I can make that make me feel more comfortable in those environments. Not to say that I'm not comfortable in other environments, but there is something really nice about that. I'm like, oh, there's like positive some thinking and some of these other things that I can take for granted a lot of the time. And then when I'm not in those environments, I get whiplash and I'm like, oh, wow, this is a very stark difference. And so I think that people are driven by community. I think people are also just driven by entertainment, right? Like we want to have fun. And so I think that games and internet experiences that are fun, things like crypto, the games, I think that is the most fun thing I've ever done on the internet, was play that game. And that I'm sure people are going to hear about that and be like, I'm willing to like download a wallet, swap some USD for ETH and like submit for the next one because they heard about that, right? Who otherwise wouldn't have downloaded a wallet. And I'm sure that will convert some people over to going over that hump. And so I think of things like that as being, yes, status, also just like belonging, also fun, entertainment. And I'm sure there's many other reasons.
It's really interesting when I think about this question sometimes because sometimes when I join different communities or activities like Crypto the Game, for example, I had no idea really what to expect. And I would say one of many positive things that I got out of it is the sense of community. And I really wasn't expecting that, but it was cool to see, at least in the tribe I was in to start, somebody formed a Telegram group. And I think a lot of the tribes had this, or a Discord group, or some sort of private group chat where all the members got together and talked through strategies, try to solve the puzzles together, and formed this community and formed new friendships. That was something I wasn't really expecting. But on the other hand, I think about other activities that I do, especially high friction activities. And then I think about the communities that I'm part of there. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but there are some activities I partake in and I do enjoy partaking in, but I don't necessarily want to identify with that group of people as a
Mm.
whole. And it's interesting to me. And I don't know what, I haven't really unpacked that or reflected too much or analyzed it to figure out exactly what's at the core of that thing and what is the thing that needs to happen or needs to not happen for people to really not just want to partake in a high friction activity, but also want to make that their identity, which creates that stronger bond that makes them want to take that action even more. Have you experienced
Mm.
that or do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Would you say that it's that you don't want to be associated publicly at all, or that you don't want to overrepresent your alignment with that community or that group as an aspect of your identity? Do you actually not want to be associated, or do you want to be just like not make that like a big thing for you?
I think it's more the latter. Yeah, it's
Mm.
not the total like non-association. It's more, for instance, I can give you an example. One thing that I like to do is climb, like rock climb. And it's something I enjoy, but it's not really something that I go around telling people like I'm a climber or I want to identify with that community just because I've been exposed to the community and it can be super intense. And that's not how I see myself and my relationship to rock climbing. So, if that example helps.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Is there?
Whereas take something like Crypto the Game, that wasn't something that when I paid that point 0.1 ETH to join the game that I was like, "Yes, my identity as a Crypto the Game player. This is who I am." Not at all, but then once I joined the game and I felt that sense of community and camaraderie and made new friends, then I was like, "Yes, I wanna be known as somebody who played Crypto the Game."
Interesting. So it sounds like you have a felt sense of the reputation or the indicators that membership to a community or a subculture might represent for you. And you have like a different level of alignment with the reputations of different subcultures that you participate in.
It's not so much even reputation makes it sound, at least to me, like there's some sort of ranking system. Like certain activities to me indicate higher reputation points than others. It's not even so much like that. I think it really is just alignment with the values of that community or alignment with the people. Maybe I don't even know what the values are in that community, but just based off of the people that I've met through those communities, alignment with those people as I perceive whatever values those people seem to hold. Maybe it's that.
Right. So said another way, it seems like you have an awareness of what people generally think about a specific group that you participate in. And you may or may not have full alignment with what that perception is. And so you feel like you want to create some distance. People perceive rock climbers as intense in some way that you don't feel alignment with. Might not want to overrepresent your alignment with rock climbing to those people because they might infer things about you that you don't feel are correct. Is that
Exactly.
more accurate?
Yeah, exactly. Or even with crypto, honestly. I know you live in Williamsburg, and so you're surrounded with all of that. I live in the opposite of Williamsburg, where there are no crypto people, and I don't necessarily walk around telling everyone that I'm in crypto or that I work in crypto because of some of the negative connotations that come with that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that the nature of being a part of subcultures is that they are misunderstood by most people. That's what makes them a subculture, is that they have a sense of reality that is distinct enough from the mainstream that they have a shared identity in not sharing what the mainstream feels about a certain topic. I've had experience of being a part of multiple subcultures, crypto included, like Burning Man, another one, that are like intensely misunderstood, at least from my perspective, like mainstream, but also that mainstream perception is not wholly incorrect either. When I think about the criticisms of Burning Man, I think, yeah, those are all valid criticisms. And there's all this other stuff that's wonderful about it that I do feel alignment with that you don't understand because maybe this person has never been to the burn, right? Or hasn't really actually spoken to anybody who I would consider someone that as a good example of what I value in that community. And so I think the same thing about crypto. It's if you think that crypto is like full of fraud, hacks, schemes, get rich quick stuff, like all this stuff, you're right. But also it's full of all this other amazing art and creative people and people who are trying to build like more collective mindsets and positive sum thinking and trying to increase access to opportunity and wealth and distribute resources more effectively. And like that's also there. And there's this outer layer, right? I think that Jess Sloss refers to it as the outer crust that you have to get through to see the rest of it. And when you go and on like YouTube or something like that, if you look up anything crypto, you're going to find that outer crust and you have to make your way in. And so what I'm really excited about is like, how do you turn it inside out so that the people that would align with what we know to be a part of what on-chain culture is actually something you encounter earlier in your journey. And I think that this is kind of a tangent, but I think that in order to do that, we have to change the game that gets things attention, right? And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of the conversation about like, how you finding fans, how you finding distribution. If you're dealing mainly on engagement-driven platforms, because those platforms are farming attention so they can serve ads because that's who pays the bills, then the things that get the most attention, shock, and awe are gonna be at the surface, right? And that's what forms the crust. And so your scams, your hacks, your token prices, all this stuff is the stuff that's easiest to boost and get clicks and likes and whatever on, or the most controversial, right? And I'm not saying anything new. We all understand this. But if we have structural differences in how we curate content or how we recommend content across different people or groups or communities, we have a chance to actually distribute things and gain reach for stuff based on shared values rather than just like universal shock and awe factor. And I think that's how you take a subculture that's misunderstood and export some of the things that are not the mainstream perception. And once that happens, I think I feel a lot more comfortable just signaling my membership to those communities at a higher degree in my like broader identity.
I speak from experience when I say that launching a DAO is not easy work. I've spent countless hours trying to figure out how to manage a community, get people to vote on proposals, and figure out how to set everything up on chain. Tally does all of that hard work for me while providing a full suite of tools for my community to create drafts, collaborate on proposals, incentivize voting, and most importantly, stay safe and secure on chain while doing it all. Tally is the home of DAO governance. Launch your DAO with Tally at tally.xyz. Before we dive deeper into that, let's just back up and define what we're talking about with on-chain culture. So in order to understand if we want to be part of this culture or not, how to further grow this culture, let's first make sure we're on the same page about what we even mean when we talk about on-chain culture.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely not going to define it as like the definition because I think that the whole thing is we need to have shared sense making around what that means. But for me, I think the things that stick out are we have an understanding of what's possible when you curate your identity on chain, right? That leads us to want to mint things as a way to show appreciation for it, as a way to curate our identity. I also view participation, like active participation, as a value of the space, right? So when you look at things like crypto the game, I want to be someone who participated in that because one, it's fun, but also I want people to know that I participate in stuff, that I get involved and I get my hands dirty and I like to actually touch and feel and play and do the things that are happening, because I think that's something that is valued here. And not only that, but the identity of a builder in this space, I think, is also a high signal thing that people aspire to, is like being a dev, being a builder, right? Making those offerings to the space and then participating in other people's offerings is kind of what makes this whole thing work. And so those are some of the things that I associate with on-chain culture and values that I think are in the ecosystem. And that is not an exhaustive. There's so many other things that I could name, but those are things that stick out to me on top of the stuff that we generally associate with crypto around like sovereignty and ownership and all of these other pieces of the puzzle. These more human-like participation and making offerings and creativity, like those feel like values that the ecosystem has for me.
And when you think about specific actions that people who participate in this on-chain culture take on a regular basis, would that be things like minting, collecting NFTs? What else would you say are regular activities people take and that participate in on-chain culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mechanics all boil down to like basically what you can do with tokens, right? It's like sign, send, buy, sell, transact, mint. Like those are the actual like mechanics, but those actions mean different things in different contexts. So if I am on a site where I just did something and I'm being given a badge or a record of what I did, then minting is a way of commemorating what I just did and adopting that as part of my identity, that I just did something. But if I'm like claiming an airdrop, then minting is something different. If I am on Zora, then minting means I'm liking something, right? And so the specific actions are there's a limited set of like new actions that we can take, but their context, I think, determines what the behavior means and the significance that it actually has.
Right. So going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, which is how do we get mainstream people to adopt this new behavior of minting, of collecting, rather than just hitting like? How do you think we get there now that we've set the stage, talked about what on-chain culture is, why people engage in high friction activities, things like that? How do we get people specifically to join this on-chain culture and start adopting these new behaviors?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'll go back to just the fact that it has to be fun and new. Like things have to be interesting. It's, oh, how do I do that? And then it's, well, you happen to do that by having a wallet and doing stuff with that wallet. What I don't find convincing is this argument around ownership. Well, it's better because you own it. And it's that doesn't mean anything, right? And you so like a average person doesn't mean anything to like own a digital anything. And because when people think about owning stuff, they think about the right to exclusion, like I have this and you don't, and I can look at it and you can't. And so when people associate ownership with things on the internet, I don't think it clicks for them to understand that what's new about that. I think you have to go a step further to like, what can they now do? What can they now participate in? What can they access? What can they have a say in, right? What are these other second degree actions they can take as a result of that ownership? And is it read, write, own? Yes, technically. Is it read, write, participate? Is it read, write, do? Right? I think that we could have like that last item in that read, write, own slogan, like flip through a bunch of different actions that are actually possible because of the ownership, that are actually much more convincing to a regular person who's just trying to use the internet to have fun and make a living. And I think that's the stuff that we should focus on, is like, how do we make that connection for more people? How do we create more fun things to do that you can't do in Web 2?
I think another problem I've observed with the ownership sort of narrative is that people think they like to be owners and they think that owning things is sexy. But when it comes down to it, I don't think most people want the responsibility associated with owning things. We just take the simple example of owning versus renting your house. When you rent, if something breaks, you contact your landlord, you complain about it until it gets fixed. If you're the landlord, if you own your place, it's up to you to figure it out. If something breaks, it's up to you to maintain everything. It's up to you to make sure your house is in working order and that you're not creating damage to it that's going to be long lasting or anything like that. And that's a big responsibility. And it is much harder work than renting. Renting is easy work. You get more rewards when you own, but it's also a lot harder work. So I think that's the part that is missed in a lot of the narrative is how much more difficult it is to own than it is to rent. And that is the high friction, again, going back to high friction activities that we were talking about. That's the high friction activity that people think they want. But when it comes down to it, they're like, this is actually like too much work. I'm going to go back to renting.
Yeah. And I also don't think that digital ownership has a lot of the same qualities that physical ownership has that we normally associate with why we want to own things. So, like when I own a house, I get to live in the house. And therefore, other people don't live in the house. I get it all to myself. And yes, I have additional responsibilities, but that's an asset that appreciates, right? And I don't have to pay rent now because once I own my house, I don't have to pay to live anywhere, right? I've paid it off. And I think that digital ownership doesn't always have those qualities. And so we have to actually build that functionality that the ownership gives you, because the traditional things that we associate with ownership aren't always present. Like, yes, a token that you own does appreciate in the same way that a house may appreciate. But those other aspects of ownership, I think there's like a list of the 7 aspects of ownership or something like that, and like digital collectibles don't fit a few of them that happen to be the things that people think about when they think about ownership. So when you say, oh, you can own this post on a social media thing, it's, what does that mean? Why do I want to do that? Oh, because then it's associated with you. It's associated with me when I bookmark it on Instagram too. And so I think we have to go a step further than ownership to really get across what's possible here.
So, what is the narrative that you think we should be crafting to people? I mean, it's easy to say we got to make things more fun. We have to make things more engaging, more interesting, but more tangibly speaking, more practically speaking, what does that look like? What do we need to do who are in the space already? And what's that message or narrative that we need to communicate to the mainstream to get them interested enough and thinking that this is worth their time to spend on it to overcome all of these high friction points and adopt into their regular behavior because it's worth it in some way?
Yeah, I think that answer is going to be so multifaceted. Like different people are going to resonate with different things. So I don't think there's going to be a silver bullet sort of narrative. I think that some people are going to be like, oh, I mean, it's already what's happening. Some people get in because they want to buy Bitcoin, right? Other people get in because they want to play a game, right? And I think that's just going to continue. And so the thing that I'm just excited about is surfacing and showcasing and spotlighting the things that you can do, so that somebody can come in and say, oh, they don't have to spend months and tons of doom scrolling to follow the right people on Twitter so that they can like maybe find out the stuff that's happening. I'm excited about how do we curate, spotlight, how do we take the community as a whole and surface what is happening, what I can do, so that everyone can find their own reason to join. Like different people are going to have the thing that takes them over, right? A Survivor fan who's not interested in crypto at all now hears about how Survivor crypto, Internet Survivor is a thing, and they have to just buy ETH to do it. That's like a easy win for them, right? Whereas otherwise they're like not even thinking about crypto. And so I think that there's going to be different answers. So I'm like really just curious about how do we make it easier for builders to build stuff, for people to create stuff, so that we get a wider set of things that you can do. And then how do we curate those and show them to people and help people understand what they are? And I think that's like another level, is that people make stuff, but they don't always spend the time to explain it. And so what I've been trying to do is, even if it's on Warpcast or like on Twitter or in Telegram groups where people like shill stuff, I'll like, if I want to look at something, I'll look at it and I'll just ask questions like, so here's what I'm understanding about this. Is that accurate? No, actually it's not. This is what I mean. Oh, okay. So then this is what it is. Yes. No. Oh, that's actually quite confusing. I would never have gotten there from what you wrote. Oh, and I'm just trying to help the projects that I find interesting explain themselves a little bit better. And I think that not that I'm like coaching them, but that I'm just like reflecting back what I'm understanding about it as someone who's in the space. And I think that that's what I'm excited about. It's just like how to showcase stuff, but also help sense make around why something is interesting, why something is fun, and what's new. Like everyone is putting something out with an idea of here's like a new thing, right? No one's building something that they think it entirely already exists. There's something new. And I'm always curious to find out from a builder who put something out, what is the new thing that you're trying to do here, right? It might look like something else, but you think there's something new here. So what is it? I want to understand it. And I think that if we all led with curiosity in that way, that we would start surfacing a lot more of these gems that like are things that we can participate in the ecosystem and why they're special or why they're interesting.
What do you think are the best strategies when you start thinking about growth and distribution on chain? So reaching more people to bring into your community on chain, telling more people about your on chain product or your on chain app, your on chain game, or whatever it is. I think distribution is something that we've really struggled with in Web3, and I haven't really seen any solutions to distribution yet. And it seems like even Web3 podcasters, Web3 content creators, Web3 media people, they're all still posting on Web2 platforms for distribution because there just isn't that distribution in Web3 yet. So when you think about like on-chain distribution, how we can take advantage of that, do any strategies or ideas come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like on-chain distribution transcends and includes Web2 distribution. Like you don't stop doing those other things because these platforms are still relevant. They do still work to get the word out about something that you're doing. But I do think there are net new opportunities to distribute what we're doing, like that are emerging. And that this is like a nascent thing that is happening. So I think of things like Daylight, for example, where they have a Scout community and they also have APIs that index things that are happening on platforms, mints that are happening, and they're associating them with tokens that they're relevant for, whether because those tokens are like whitelisted or allow listed to use that thing. If it's an airdrop and it's like you fit the conditions for this airdrop, or because they're like, I own a boys club Zaddy. So when Chase's podcast was put on Zora, I got recommended to mint one of the episodes that had Parker from Boys Club on the episode. And I was like, that's really cool. Like I didn't know A, that Chase's podcast went on Zora, or B, that Parker had an episode on Chase's podcast that I didn't know about yet. But because I had this token in my wallet that I minted 2 years ago or something like that, I was recommended this thing. And I was like, that's really cool. And that was actually a moment for me that like clicked, was when I received that notification from Daylight. And I was like, oh, this is something really new. We even had something that we did recently with our product Quests, and we minted something on Quests just as a test. It was like our first mainnet mint. And I got a DM from a friend like within an hour being like, what's this? Because they saw it as like a recommended mint for them on Interface, the app, because I minted it. And I was like, damn, like we knew that was going to happen, but I didn't think it was going to happen that quickly. And so I think that the techniques are really just to attach on-chain actions to the things that you're putting out there and really think about who is going to be the first few minters and who do you want to get minting your thing so that those recommendation systems that are already in place and that will be in place in the future, pick those up and recommend them to the next people that it's relevant for. And so I think that like this idea of like early minters for anything that you're putting out there is going to be super relevant. And I also think that like the minters that make the most sense are like the people who worked on it. So getting those people who worked on it to immediately mint something as soon as it comes out sends a signal to like their networks who are most likely to actually be interested in what they're doing. And so I think that's like a technique that I would employ, is really thinking carefully about first minters, the way that you might think about who's going to hunt your product on Product Hunt. That used to matter a lot on that website.
It kind of makes us rethink what are those key demographics that we've been trying to track so hard in Web 2. Like Web 2 is all about user demographics. What's your age range? What's your gender? What's your geographic location? All of these things. But in a way, it's like we can take user behavior based on what we see from their on-chain wallet and associate that with similar user behavior towards a different product or towards a different service. And I think that's just, I mean, that makes so much sense, and it doesn't violate user privacy by farming their data, their personal data about themselves, but it still achieves the same end result of being able to cross-promote products, show ads that are relevant to people, like actually relevant to people, because on-chain activity speaks for itself. It's the whole like put your money where your mouth is thing. You can see what people are spending money on and know what they're going to spend more money on. So that to me is a really cool thing too, is that it helps us, like on-chain data and analytics helps us rethink user demographics and what are those demographics that we need in order to feed ads and to market to people.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one thing that came up for me when I first started really thinking about this was like, oh, great. Like just another way to serve ads. Like, awesome. Right. And I had the moment of, oh, that's, or okay, whatever. It's not that exciting. Or it's like just inevitable that this becomes the same thing again. But I think that just to call back to what we said earlier about like structural differences, it's like when the content on that populates the sites that we look at is separate from the site itself, we're no longer held captive to that interface in order to see that content or interact with those people or do those actions. And so if I don't like the things that are being served to me on Warpcast, I can go to Supercast, right? Or a number of other clients that already exist and will emerge for Farcaster protocol. Whereas right now, there's already a profile of me in the like Facebook ecosystem about who I am, what I like, what gets my attention. I have no idea what's on that profile because it's been inferred about me based on behavior. And it goes back a number of years at this point, like 10 years about what I am interested in. And if I'm being served content, I don't like or don't want to be a big part of my consumption, then I can't escape it. If I don't go on Instagram, I don't know what my friends are doing or I miss out on certain things. But if I go on Instagram, I have to deal with sifting through a bunch of these different pieces of content that I don't really want to spend time on because they're just things that get attention or they get attention from people that fit a profile that looks like mine, right? So I think that it's different here where one, there's like this consensual and intentional curation of identity that happens. It also happens in public. So there's things that I'm only going to interact with if I feel like I want to be associated with them to some degree, right? Going back to what we were saying about being associated with different communities. And if I don't like how a certain client or app or website is treating me, I can leave and I can draw a boundary around my relationship to that. And I can seek out that content via a different. And I think that is these are structural differences that are not possible. And so when I think about what we're building with Quest, we'll have our content being, first of all, it's on chain. And second of all, the rest of it that's on chain is on some kind of decentralized storage. And so if people don't like how we rank projects or how we do things, someone else can create a website that does that. Or if they want to emphasize different aspects of the projects and they think that's a more relevant way to surface things that people can do and creations that builders are making in the ecosystem, they can create that themselves and they can bring people there. And that's okay with us because at the end of the day, like we're making money on protocol fee. I know we haven't talked about this yet, but like we're making money on protocol fees. And so we're aligned with that, with them doing that. We don't have to keep you captive on our like feed or our homepage or whatever in order to exist in the same way that like Twitter does.
I did want to make sure we save some time for you to talk about Quest because Quest has been a sponsor of Rehash for a few seasons now, which we're super grateful for. And the product has actually changed over time and especially pre-season 7. So the product that you guys have now and the focus and everything is different from what we've been talking about in past seasons. So can you just back up for a second and explain some of the main changes that you've made to Quest from last season to this season and what the product is now and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely different. This is the journey of a founder often is this sort of pivoting and rediscovering like what you're after. And I feel like I went through a period of time where I wasn't really sure like what my relationship was to the ecosystem and like what I was able to contribute or what I might be able to contribute. But I do feel like this renewed sense of purpose and calling to like do something, specifically the thing that we're doing now. And so it's really cool to come back on the show and be like, oh, this is a totally different thing, but I actually feel so much more aligned with it as an individual. Such is the journey, I guess, of a founder at times. But yeah, what we're trying to do is just really redefine the way that Web3 builders and creators launch projects. And so we've seen what it looks like when people announce something on Twitter or on a blog post, and then they have like a commemorative mint, right, on Zora or something like that. And these things are separate. And the problem is that if I go look at the announcement, I don't see the opportunity to mint necessarily. And if I drive you to the mint, it doesn't actually have the context of the announcement. And that means that when that mint gets minted and distributed and it goes through this like flywheel of recommendation systems, it doesn't carry that context and that announcement with it because that thing is living on Twitter or some other post. And so what we've done is basically just combined an announcement post that you would make for anything that you're building or that you've worked on, or a community milestone of some kind that you're trying to get out there, and combined it with a commemorative mint page that's really slick and it's designed to spread via these new systems. And so the way that it works is you create a page, and we've created like a really slick template that allows you to like display very cleanly like what you've worked on. It's very easy to create a page that looks really great. You can also list the people that worked on it on the page. And then what people can do is they can actually support it. And when they support it, this is a mint that doesn't just upvote it on our website and on our homepage, but it also sends a signal throughout these new on-chain distribution recommendation systems like Daylight and apps like Interface that you did that and that it might be relevant to people who are connected to you or in relationship to you. And so the first minters of the project can also be the contributors, just like we talked about. So it's embedding that new technique in the product itself. And they get a commemorative NFT that has their autograph on it and that lists the role that they had on the platform. And that's a different NFT from the one that you get when you support. And that helps to create this like tiered commemorative collection that serves as memorabilia of what actually occurred, but also functionally does help to distribute the content. And so you create a quest page, you recognize contributors on chain, you get supports via mints, and supporters can then share their referral link and get paid in ETH when people mint through their link. So everyone's incentivized to help builders spread their thing. And when people now have that NFT, they are part of your on-chain community. So you can reach out to them directly via quests for your next announcement. You can also then take them obviously to other platforms and give them abilities and access and privileges as someone who supported you because there's context around that action and what their relationship to you is. And so we think that on-chain communities are actually the way that builders and creators build these like lasting moats and support systems for themselves. And that quest is just another way to do that, but it's a really clean and tight way that I haven't seen like integrated vertically like this before.
I think this might be the first product that I've heard actually try to address the distribution problem. And I'm super excited for the discoverability, especially because all of the mint engines I've seen so far are so fragmented. Like for a while, we were minting all of our podcast NFTs on Manifold. Now we're using pods, but there isn't across any of these mint engines. I guess some of them that serve as marketplaces as well, like Zora, have more discoverability built in. But something like Manifold, which has so many people minting on it, there's such a big opportunity for them to have this discoverability page with upvoting, with recommended media, things like that. It's just nobody has tried addressing that problem yet. So I'm really bullish on that aspect. I mean, on all of Quest, but especially that aspect. I'm really excited to see how that plays out. And even for my own personal gain, I'm not as chronically online as many people are in Web3. And so I miss a lot of things. So to be able to have a page where I know all of these products are on here, all of this new media or whatever people are building is on this page, and I can just go check it once a week or every couple weeks and see what's new that I haven't seen before and check the top 5, top 10 list and check out those projects. That's going to save me so much time that I would otherwise be wasting on Twitter, just scrolling through all this noise, all these like meme coins that are popping up. I'm like, where is the actual good stuff that people are building?
Yeah. And speaking of Zora having all this discoverability, we actually use Zora contracts to mint the Quest contracts. And so you're automatically getting all that distribution through Zora and any systems that index and watch Zora activity. And I think that's like illustrative of a structural difference because it's like when you mint something on our platform, you're actually paying every person who was involved in getting you that content. So for example, let's say you get a referral link for a Quest. Your mint fee, which is the same standard mint fee that Zora is using, gets distributed to the person who sent you the link to the Quest page, the scout who posted the Quest or the builder who posted the Quest, period, like on our site. We get a platform fee for obviously hosting the website and creating everything. And then Zora gets a fee because they supply the smart contract. And then of course you're paying the gas to power the chain. And so there's this like top to bottom thing where you're compensating every person who was involved in getting you in that for a relatively small mint fee. And I think that is a structural difference that matters because each of those people or those organizations or those technologies don't have to seek revenue elsewhere in a way that might not be aligned with your well-being. And so you're getting this like top to bottom alignment with you as an end user, and you're paying for that, right? And so it's like literally a small price to pay for not having your mental health compromised by a platform that's selling you out to advertisers, for example, or selling you out to just content you don't want to see or that is not nourishing to your soul. And so I think that what we're trying to do is just create a good example of a business and a website that hopefully can be self-sustaining and use this new model to do so, that is like community supported. And therefore we don't have to do things that are not aligned with people who use our site.
Love it. We didn't even touch on that mental health component, but I do believe and hope that with our new models that we're coming up with in Web3 with Onchain Media and things like that, that we can change this, whatever we've created from Web2 social doom scrolling all day and that affecting their mental health and all of that. But that's a whole other conversation. And I know we're out of time today, Richie, but I have to ask you before you go one last question that I ask every guest this season. The first part of this question is, will Ethereum and or Bitcoin reach an all-time high in 2024?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I do think so. Yeah.
what will that high price be for Ethereum and Bitcoin?
I don't play
Give me your
this
best
game.
guess.
Sorry.
Give me your best guess.
Nope, I don't do it.
All right. Well, we know it's going to hit an all-time high. So that means more than 69K for Bitcoin. And what's the Ethereum 5,500, something like that? All-time highs. You heard it here first. I think most of our guests have said yes, actually. So I'm feeling really bullish on 2024 and hopefully we get there. ETH is over 3K already, which when's the last time we saw that, right? And maybe by the time this comes out, it'll be at 4K. Who knows? Let's see how it goes. But Richie, last thing before you go, tell people where they can find you and where they can go to check out the new version of quests and set up their own quests and all that good stuff.
Sure. So I'm Richie Bonilla on Twitter, Richie on Warpcast or Farcaster, and quests. You can find us at quests.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll link all that in the show notes. Really appreciate you coming back on the podcast. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll be back again next Thursday with another episode of Rehash. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Rehash. Rehash is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Diana Chen, and sponsored by Zerion, Tally, and Quest. Rehash is also supported by our community of NFT holders who curate our guest lineup each season. To get involved, head over to our website at rehashweb3.xyz and collect this episode as an NFT. Anyone who collects an episode becomes part of the Rehash community and will be able to nominate guests for future seasons. Collectors will also be able to tune into our recordings live at pleaser.house and hear our episodes early and unedited. To learn more about how to become a guest on the podcast, go to rehashweb3.xyz/podcast. And to learn more about sponsoring the podcast, go to rehashweb3.xyz/sponsor. Finally, be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at RehashWeb3 or on Warpcast or Lens at Rehash. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.